Welcome, everyone, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. A big thank you to our man, Stephen Warner, on the Barton organ. And I do hope that many of you were able to take in 1 week. This is the 1920 film. It was a first release for Buster Keaton. And it was actually a parody of a Ford Motor Company documentary from 1919. And Buster's played on these boards, so yay for Buster Keaton, a perfect man as an opening act for our guest today, as he certainly must be a dancer himself. Hi, my name's Christina Hamilton. I'm the director of the series. I also have a special welcome. We have some folks in our midst today who are newly admitted MFA and MDes students to the Stamp School of Art and Design. So welcome to you. And what a great week that you picked to come, because here we are, thrilled to be coming to you from the 56th Ann Arbor Film Festival and presenting legendary dancer, choreographer, and filmmaker. She referred to herself as an ex-filmmaker today, so we might have to take that up. Yvonne Rainer in the house today. Yeah. A big thank you to our fair partner on this endeavor, the Ann Arbor Film Festival. And a special welcome to all of you film festival goers out there in the audience that don't know what the Penny Stamp Series is. Because yes, we are the Penny Stamp Series, and we're here every Thursday at the Michigan Theater. We offer free programming like today with innovators, creatives, artists, and designers. So if you don't know about us, if you're in the area, our calendar is out in the lobby. Please do take one and join us again. This week, as part of the festival activities, we're actually participating as a partner with many special events, screenings, installations, and salons. And I want to entice and encourage, especially the art and design students, to thoroughly take advantage of the festival, because this is a place where you can free your mind from the dictations of popular media that so have us in their grip. And after all, the festival itself was started at the School of Art and Design in 1963 under the auspices of our dearly departed Professor George Manupelli. And so it is a legacy that is here for you, so take full advantage. Just a couple of highlights to point out to you and to all of you here today. Yvonne Rainer's work will screen. There are 2 screenings of Yvonne Rainer's work to come this week. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in the screening room, Privilege will screen. And then on Saturday, here in the main theater at 4 p.m., 5 Easy Pieces, and featuring a performance before 5 Easy Pieces of Rainer's Chair Pillow by the Freshman Touring Company from the U of M Department of Dance. So 2 Rainer screenings to come, and also please pay special attention to the off-the-screen program of works. This is the expanded cinema performances, new media installations, and salons, which we are very pleased to be participating with. There are 19 artists that are here as part of that program. Tomorrow evening, you can meet some of them between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, right out here in the Grand Foyer lobby. The artists will be having a meet and greet, so you can meet those folks tomorrow. And tomorrow evening, make your way through Graffiti Alley out back, because Matt Rappaport has a performance from 8 o'clock to 11 p.m. in Graffiti Alley. On Sunday, I just have to say this because it sounds so good. Bitch Thunder, your favorite all-female party drumline at various times starting at 4:30 p.m. in the Michigan Theater. Don't miss that. Lots of good things. These are just a few highlights, folks. So it's a robust and dynamic program. Get your programs. The week still awaits, so don't miss a thing. Please do remember to silence your cell phones. Due to the festival's robust program, we're not going to be able to have a Q&A today. But never fear, lots of good things still to do. So, for a proper introduction of our guest today, please welcome someone who I think is doing a fantastic job, the Ann Arbor Film Festival's Associate Director of Programs, Miss Katie McGowan.
Hello, everyone, welcome. Yvonne Rainer is an American icon. Before interdisciplinary artist was a label lightly tossed around, Rainer fluidly worked across media. She is a dancer, an accomplished dancer, choreographer, ex-filmmaker, visual artist, and author. One of the founders of the Judson Dance Theater in New York in 1962, Rainer made a transition to filmmaking following a 15-year career as a choreographer and dancer. Her experimental feature-length films include Lives of Performers, 1972, Privilege from 1990, Murder and Murder, 1996, and others. Rainer returned to dance in 2000 via a commission from the Baryshnikov Dance Foundation, and through this, After Many a Summer Dies the Swan was born. Museum retrospectives of her work, including drawings, photos, films, notebooks, and memorabilia, have been presented at premier venues internationally. Rainer's published works include the memoir, Feelings Are Facts, A Life, out on MIT Press, Work, 1961 to 73, The Films of Y.R, A Woman Who, Essays, Interviews, and Scripts, and Moving and Being, which just came out in 2017. She is a recipient of 2 Guggenheim Fellowships, a MacArthur Fellowship, and a U.S.A. Fellowship. At the film festival, we work with Christina and the Stamp series to maintain a list of, like a dream list of speakers we'd like to invite. And Yvonne Rainer was on our list as of a couple years ago. And then last year, through our film festival submission process, we received a submission. It's a pretty straightforward documentary, really well done by a filmmaker named Jack Walsh. Jack Walsh. And we watched the film. It's also entitled, like her memoir, Feelings Are Facts, The Life of Yvonne Rainer. And as we watched this movie, it wasn't a perfect fit for last year's program, but the idea was born to show it prior to the festival and do a bit of a retrospective of Rainer's work. And so we were delighted to learn that Christina was able to secure Ms. Rainer as our speaker tonight. This is a really huge honor for the film festival to be able to present a true interdisciplinary artist and icon, Yvonne Rainer. So please join me in welcoming the indomitable Yvonne Rainer.
I really enjoyed the live organ, and I hoped that I could make a grand entrance to match that music. I thank Katie and Leslie and Peter and Christine and anyone else who's responsible aiding and abetting my visit here. I'm going to read an essay. I love long titles, so it will last about 45, 50 minutes. It's called Revisions, A Truncated History of the Universe for Dummies, a Rant, Dance, and Letter to Humanity. March 12th, 2018, to whom it may concern. My name is Apollo Musagetes, leader of the Muses, god of the sun. Just so you won't worry about who's minding the store up there while I'm away, let me reassure you that Calliope and Melpomene have taken over my job of guiding a sun chariot across the heavens every day. The truth of the matter is that I came down to Earth this time around for a well-deserved vacation, and also at the invitation of choreographer Emily Coates, who was about to present her work about Balanchine and his ballet Apollo in New York City. She asked me to play myself in the piece. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. She must have heard of a performance I did while I was visiting some years ago and trying my hand at choreography. I had invited Isaac Newton, to you, to be my partner in an erotic duet during which 50 red rubber balls were to be thrown down from the choir loft of Judson Church in New York City. He declined. He objected to my choice of 50 balls rather than one, but also said I was too old for him. I had to admit that I'd been around quite a bit longer than he had. Anyway, Emily's dance received a pretty good review in the New York Times. By the way, mine didn't. So you see, your Earth is not an entirely unfamiliar place to me. It was eons before this current visit that I was drafted by Zeus, aka Jupiter, to come down here to get things straightened out for you guys. In one of those early efforts, I approached that capricious voyager, Ulysses, aka Odysseus. I had made a special trip out to his ship to appeal to him. Ulysses, I said, stop farting around with Scylla and Charybdis and get yourself home to Penelope. She doesn't know whether you're alive or dead and is just about to give up on you. Go home, Ulysses, go home. And did he listen to me? No, he did not. Instead, he had himself tied to the mast so he could listen to those ladies out on that island. I guess you gotta do what you gotta do. Around the same time, there is Ariadne, it was Eurydice, who died from a snake bite and landed in the underworld. Her boyfriend, Orpheus, had asked me to go down there to help him negotiate a pact with Pluto, aka Hades, who was so charmed by his lyre playing that he agreed to let her go, but on one condition. On the way back, with Eurydice following us, I was filled with trepidation and felt compelled to remind him, Orpheus, you were warned not to look back. She's right behind us. No need to look back at her. Please don't look back. Well, we all know what happened to her. And him, eventually. I have to confess, I still feel a little guilty about her. Would he have turned to look if I had kept my mouth shut? Then there was that heel, Achilles. I tried to reason with him. Look, man, you've been at this heroics game long enough. Let Hector find someone else to punch in the nose. Take a rest. You've made your mark on the world. Isn't it about time you retired? And give me a break with that Trojan horse, Homer. I couldn't believe how anyone could be so gullible as to bring that thing into the city. Even after I joined forces with the wailing Cassandra, it was pointless to try to stop them. In every instance, Ulysses, Achilles, Homer, the Trojans, everyone, it was like talking to a wall. Which reminds me, pay no attention to those unsubstantiated rumors that I raped Cassandra and was the cause of Daphne's being turned into a tree. The truth about Cassandra and me is that we had a consensual affair, but then she complained to her mother that I had seduced her with books, that I had made her read all of Proust, Tolstoy, and Dostoevsky in rapid succession, which in her eyes was as good as telling her she could order her wedding dress. Needless to say, at that point, I made one of my many hasty exits. I admit, I've said and done some shameful things in my day, like allowing 2 of my suffering cats to live too long before having them euthanized, and forcing sex on my muses. I could describe many more instances of offensive behavior, guilt for which has impelled me to return to Earth from time to time for a shot at redemption. From my present vantage point, however, and with enduring admiration for Cassandra for her activism during the Trojan War, let me assure you that all in all, I'm not such a bastard as I used to be, as you shall see for yourselves soon enough as I proceed. Now that I'm here in what you call the 21st century, I plan to visit all the temples dedicated to me, and beyond that, I also see it as a duty to lay more of that stern advice on you mortals. So last week, I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 or 2 stones. First, visiting the temple of Apollo in Palmyra, then going on to Damascus for an audience with Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. Both excursions were disappointing, big time. The temple was a shambles, and Assad turned out to be a real scumbag. If anyone needs reasoning with, it's him. I went over there and got my foot in the door. Don't worry, I was very polite. "Mr. Assad," I yelled through the partly open door. "Mr. Assad, with all due respect, what kind of country do you think you're going to rule when all this is over? The entire population will be either dead or fled. Why, I couldn't even get near the gates of Aleppo, so many refugees were streaming out." Thick as thieves, I refrained from adding. He slammed the door in my face, nearly breaking my foot. The same thing had happened with Agamemnon in Mycenae after I berated him for going to war over a single broad, and that idiot King Lear who couldn't see what was in front of his nose. I told William if he couldn't do better than that, I wasn't coming to his party. And Oedipus. I pleaded with Oedipus not to kill that old guy in the road. I knew if he did that all hell would break loose, especially after that weirdo in Vienna got so stuck on him. Once again, my entreaties were to no avail. After many centuries of such rebuffs, I was getting pretty demoralized. Mind you, I've approached countless more troublemakers who subsequently disdained my proposals, like that overachiever Charlemagne, and badass in the Philippines, and vicious brat in North Korea. In every case, intervention was impossible. And furthermore, and much to my chagrin, I couldn't even begin to pique anyone's interest in the difference between transcription, transcendence, and analogy. Boy, one failure after another. So, I decided to go back to my shrink. I told Dr. Kellerman the whole story. Without missing a beat, he responded. "Apollo," he said, "you're barking up the wrong tree. How can you expect them to pay attention to you when you're running around down here like a mere mortal or a chicken with its head cut off? Where are your 12 black stallions and golden chariot? Get them out of storage. You've got to make a grand entrance. Only then will they take you seriously." "Are you suggesting I should make a spectacle of myself?" I asked. "Absolutely," he replied. "Go for it." I went out of there thinking, this guy is well worth his $200 an hour. So I hurried back to Olympus and started to clean up my golden chariot. Well, what do you know? Obama called. Yes, that Obama. "You've got to come down here. Hillary needs you." He sounded stressed. I'm coming, I assured him. And I quickly finished polishing my golden chariot and hitched up the 12 black stallions. After persuading Calliope and Melpomene to traverse the heavens every day in my absence in a somewhat shabby carriage, the only replacement I could muster, to be drawn by a team of sturdy mules, I set out for Earth. Oi, weh ist mir. Alas and alack, I had totally forgotten about the pull of Earth's gravitational field. We got burnt to a crisp, and I was reduced to a subatomic particle of cosmic dust. Who would listen to me now? It wasn't easy, but I persevered. And after looking in vain for a phone booth, finally got through to Hillary on a borrowed iPhone. I asked her, "Why don't you fly out to Michigan or Wisconsin and listen to those people? Many of them have legitimate grievances. They can't find jobs, and they're sick and tired of being abandoned, betrayed, ignored, and condescended to by the elites and the likes of you. Granted, some of them may harbor a deep-seated racism in addition to their class resentments, but they can't all be neo-Nazis and misogynists. You can't just call them disparaging names. What is it you called them? Rhymes with adorable. For added emphasis, I quoted novelist Edouard Louis, who, while discussing the dignities of poverty, said in an interview, quote, "When you are subjected to endless violence in every situation, in every moment of your life, you end up reproducing it against others in other situations by other means," end quote. Well, you all know the outcome of the US election, but long before that, I felt strongly that Hillary needed to be reminded of the loathsomeness of the numbskull she was up against, or as someone called him, a fucking moron, and another, even better, an enigma wrapped inside a whoopee cushion. Prior to the election, I did warn her, if you don't reach out and make eye contact with those people, before you know it, they'll go for the first loudmouth schmuck that comes down the pike. And guess what she said to me? She said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Had she never heard Yiddish before? In spite of her tone deafness, I can't say I disliked her. In hindsight, however, it's pretty clear that the cards were stacked against her from the get-go. At this point, it would be remiss of me to assert that over the eons, we on Olympus have not made comparable and irrevocable mistakes, especially with respect to women. Always underestimating them, always blaming them for every evil that ever beset humankind. When Zeus created Pandora, for instance, it did not have to be a foregone conclusion that she would open that box, thus releasing untold miseries upon the world. I saw it coming, but didn't put my foot down strongly enough. I was too diplomatic. I should have cautioned him. "Zeus, are you sure you want to handle her in this manner?" I should have suggested that he insert a waiver that would have legally prevented her from opening the box, or would at least have given her a choice. After all, and in my estimation, things have changed only incrementally. If women aren't invited to the table, they end up on the menu. I've always regretted my timidity regarding the Pandora calamity. So, what is to be done? I've had to recoup, re-strategize. These days, I tell everyone, take one step at a time. Put your anguish emissions aside. As William Faulkner said somewhere, the past is never dead. It's not even past. And I would add, sometimes it rises up and grabs you by the throat. No need to set your hair on fire. Just try to remember, you're in this together. You are not alone. Organize. Resist. You will get through this. You shall make things better. And have patience. According to Umberto Eco, freedom and liberation are an unending task. Finally, allow me to end with a favorite quote from the late Amiri Baraka. "What can I say? It is better to have loved and lost than to have put linoleum on your living room floor." Sorry, I can't stop. As Leto, my mother, used to say when she had had a bad night's sleep, my mind kept working. My mind these days is prey to an endless loop of atrocities. Today, I'm stuck in 1916 during World War I. A young soldier is running along the edge of a trench, one arm missing, bleeding to death, knowing he is done for. Yesterday, I was somewhere in the Middle East. 2 men were carrying another man's inert body, his penis stuffed into his mouth. And the day before that, I found myself on a beach in Turkey as the corpse of a small child washed up. Much earlier in 16th century Cuba, I had to turn my eyes away as the conquistador Cortez hacked off a young woman's arms when she protested the burning of her sweetheart. I need an aspirin or something to alleviate the torment of all these images etched on my brain. Polyhymnia, one of my favorite muses, keeps begging me, nagging me, Apollo, Leave the foul planet before Zeus gets a headache and sends a meteorite, as he did to that town in Siberia in 2013. Those guys were lucky then. They may not be again, and then who'll have the headache? Not yet, I keep telling her. They've got me by the short hairs. I have to believe I can still make a difference down here. Maybe I can get to the bottom of things through more field work. There are so many unanswered questions, such as, was there a single moment, relatively speaking, in the history of the world when Homo sapiens first took a wrong turn? Artist-adventurer René Green had an interesting take on this question in a recent exhibition. And I quote, "Humans fight and lose the battle, and the thing that they fought for comes about in spite of defeat. And when it comes, it turns out not to be what they meant, and other humans have to fight for what they meant under another name," end quote. And this leads to yet another dilemma. Why did Western historians become so invested in the notion of progress in the face of overwhelming evidence that it could so readily collapse into domination, vengeance, and amnesia? When I broached this question over pizza and beer with my old chum Walter Benjamin shortly before he landed in the underworld, he had this to say, quote, "The idea of a universe with infinite repetitions without any finality or goal was a counterpoint to the Enlightenment's faith in progress," end quote. Notice that he used the word counterpoint and not rejection or refutation. Obviously, I have to do more reading about this. Let's hope that the results will pay off for you mortals. While I was still roaming around Earth looking for answers and trying to help out, there was a solar eclipse across the U.S., the United States, in the summer of 2017. Calliope and Melpomene were dismissive of all the excitement down here. Earth's moon poses little threat to them. After all, we're 400 times larger and more powerful than your barren satellite. Yet I found myself far more attentive to this event than I had been 1,300 years earlier, when Earthlings thought a solar eclipse augured the end of the world. My interest this time around can be attributed to all the fancy gadgets you people have since developed for solar measurements. The 8th century had nothing to compare with the devices common in the 21st, such as telescopes, thermometers, particle accelerators, barometers, spectrometers, pyranometers, coronagraphs, and all manner of gauges and scopes like balloons and airplanes and roosters, all of which livened things up during your recent eclipse. Okay, maybe I'm overstating. The 8th century probably had roosters whose cock-a-doodle-dooing calmed people's hysteria as the sun reappeared. During the previous summer, as a passenger on a cruise ship that was sailing around the Outer Hebrides, I was making small talk, incognito, of course, with a fellow passenger about a woman who had risen to prominence advocating for women's rights in a Middle Eastern country. After she was captured by Islamic State militants, they taped her mouth shut and strung her up with her wrists bound behind her back and her feet dangling 2 inches from the ground. Before I could finish the story, my shipmate asked, "Are you interested in history?" Not wanting to show my hand, I was somewhat evasive. I told her, "I am one of those artists who makes beauty out of misery." They were nursing shots of Lafroig on the upper deck, while I surreptitiously imbibed nips of ambrosia from my hip flask. The evening sun, less resplendent than when I was last in charge, but still navigated by Calliope and Melpomene, broke through the dappled clouds and bathed our faces in a beatific glow. My innards, unaccustomed to mortals' gourmet cuisine, complained of abuse. My cruise mates were pleasure seekers, not the dispossessed, amnesiacs, not the oppressed. They wore Izzy Miyake, they were like the lotus eaters, their sleep untroubled. They laughed and didn't weep. They were deserving, had paid their dues, worked for their monies, suffered along the way, put in their time. They had no reason to deprive themselves or scrimp, flinch, flagellate, bemoan. They agreed the world was going to hell in a handbasket, but, dear God, as one of them remarked, allow us this rollicking reprieve, a moment of relief on the woeful planet. The skipper opined, it's coming, not in my lifetime, but someday we will find a way to leave the earth behind. But some of you will have to stay, I thought, the unlucky ones, and without a doubt, the impoverished ones. It wasn't the first time I held my tongue. Eventually, as the ship was putting into port, there, lo and behold, standing on the deck was Terpsichore, all aflame and very pissed off. Zeus sent me down, she exploded. His message is, you've accomplished next to nothing down here. Shit or get off the pot. She raced on, wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. Calliope and Melpomene are fed up with driving that cheesy chariot and those stubborn mules across the heavens every day, and I'll be damned if I'm going to help Hercules clean out the Augean stables every morning for your fucking precious idle black stallions. You're shirking your responsibilities. Wind up your affairs down here and get your ass back to Olympus. Zeus is getting heartburn. She fumed on and on. I was able to placate her at last by offering a trade-off. I was willing to bring two of her favorite choreographers, Trisha Brown and Nancy Meehan, back from the dead, if she would intercede with Zeus to allow me to stay here a little longer. She hesitated, then made a counter-offer. Throw Ian White into the mix, and I'll take it up with Zeus. I had barely nodded my head in agreement when she was gone. You may not know who Ian White is. I have a footnote here. British performance artist, writer, curator. He died much too young. You mortals are so short-lived. You're born, then in the blink of an eye, you're gone. Another issue that I intend to take up with Zeus. Although there are some downsides to being a god, like never experiencing unconditional parental love and childhood wonderment, because we come into existence fully formed as speaking adults and then have to cope with the chronic fatigue of immortality. Despite such drawbacks, I would be most unwilling to exchange them for everlasting death on earth and red roses laid on my grave. So, where am I? Okay, so she made this counteroffer, throw Ian White in. I had barely nodded my head in agreement when she was gone. Without waiting for Zeus's go-ahead, I set out for the underworld to retrieve Nancy, whom I felt was a priority, as she had arrived there most recently. This time, Sharon had raised his price for ferrying people across the River Styx. Turning my pockets inside out, I managed to scrape up enough cash to cover a one-way trip and shortly reached the far shore and the entrance to the gloomy home of the dead. Much to my surprise, Cerberus, the three-headed canine guardian of the gate, gave me no trouble. After talking Pluto into offering the same contract that Orpheus had signed for the ill-fated Eurydice, I took Nancy by the hand and we fled from that place. Confident of a more felicitous outcome, we began the long, steep climb toward the light at the end of the tunnel. To be continued. September 23rd, 2017. This is beginning to sound like an online newsletter. I must say, I take a perverse pleasure in being a technophobe. Some would call me a Luddite because I don't do Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or email. I don't even have a website. And forget about modems and routers and apps and iPads and algorithms and memes and bots. I prefer talking to you face to face. Some earthling friends have urged me to start a blog, but I keep putting them off. Someday, perhaps. To continue. I was outraged when Pluto, for no good reason, reneged on his contract for Nancy Meehan and made her return to the underworld. I nearly gave up the whole maddening project. What was the point of all these messianic gambits on my part, these fruitless intrusions into Earth's dead-end affairs, these nerve-wracking efforts on behalf of the luckless dead? But then I remembered something that has kept me going, at least for the short term. While I was down there negotiating for Nancy, I had run into John Cage, who hailed me with his famous axiom, "Why try to change the world? You'll only make things worse." An assertion not to be taken lightly, mind you, but one with implications I have been slow to absorb. Even now, after all my flops, with diminishing resolve and about to conclude that I am not the right God for this enterprise, I am willing to take yet another stab at mitigating, if not changing, the worst tendencies and blunders you mortals can throw at me, quixotic as that may seem. So allow me to share with you what may turn out to be some final earthbound ruminations. 1, regarding a situation that seems to be changing day by day, I'm talking now about North Korea, I've been thinking of approaching Kim Jong-un once more to ask him point blank, what do you want in the long run? And taking off from there, I would say, I understand that it is all but impossible for you to back down and lose face when that fucking moron whoopee cushion of a president keeps upping the ante. But I can assure you that calling each other names in public like naughty schoolboys won't get you anywhere. Has no one warned you that, according to most scientists, multi-city exchanges of nuclear detonations will bring on a new ice age? Spewing so much soot and dust into the stratosphere will cause a 70% reduction in sunlight reaching the Earth for decades. Crops will not grow. Famine will ensue. Earth's populations will starve, including your own. For the sake of the world and your own populace, might you not cut that fucking moron some slack by expressing your desires more openly? Like membership in what they call the nuclear family. Let's talk. Trade with South Korea without nuclear threat? Easy. Tickets to Radio City Music Hall and the pyramids and the Eiffel Tower? A snap. Doesn't Pak Kil-yan, your UN ambassador, send you alluring descriptions of New York nightlife? Aren't you at all interested in how the rest of the world lives? There must be some space in your embattled psyche for a bit of curiosity and humility, unlike your appalling counterpart in the White House. With this tactic in mind, however, I must face the possibility that being candid in these cliffhanger circumstances may be risky. Give Mr. fucking moron whoopee cushion enough rope and he's likely to hang you with it. And I know Kim can't just say to him, get off my back and I'll be a good boy. An unlikely request from someone whose concern over the size of his dick is beggared by the whoopee cushion's even greater concern. After being confronted with the adolescent lunacy of these leaders, I was dumbfounded to read the hair-raising and casually deployed language of certain sections of the U.S. male-dominated scientific community, which is supposedly serious about dealing with the threats of nuclear apocalypse. Their communications are larded with sexual metaphors, such as vertical erector launchers, thrust-to-weight ratios, soft laydowns, deep penetration, the comparative advantages of protracted versus spasm attacks, and what one military advisor to the National Security Council described as releasing 70 to 80% of our megatonnage in one orgasmic whoomp. The psychosocial import of such reckless jargon is so grotesque that as I write, I can't allow myself even to begin to imagine the horrendous consequences. I need more time to think about this. As the fucking moron and lunatic go into a bar. Two. Now I would like to mention some astonishing things that have been happening during my present visit. Women and some men of all classes and professions in the United States are coming out of the woodwork to reveal in unequivocal detail the egregious abuses previously pulled off by their male teachers, bosses, and co-workers. Not that this kind of stuff is news to me. Olympus overruns with incidents in which the gods take advantage of their assistants and fellow gods and goddesses, as when Zeus forces Hera, aka Juno, or other deities, and sometimes even me, to suck his cock while he's talking on his cell phone. Well, I would dismiss this particular kinkiness as that's his thing, but of course he has others, like the ploy he sometimes uses to rape, let's call a spade, yes, rape Danae and other young women in the form of literally a golden shower. Whereas all I ever wanted, with him at least, was a bit of frottage. It behooves me at this point to confess to having been complicit in the not-so-distant past in some of Zeus's more outlandish erotic escapades, like the time about 100 years ago when he and I were sitting in a car parked on the south side of West 8th Street in New York City. He behind the wheel in a leather jacket and nose ring in the guise of a beautiful 20-year-old boy, me beside him in female drag. So there we were, sitting in this car at midnight across the street from a brightly lit shop, and Zeus had opened the window on his side in order to make eye contact with a handsome older guy staring out from behind the shop window. And I asked Zeus, "Do you want me to leave or stay?" And he said, "Stay." So I stayed. And in deference to Zeus and one of my favorite authors, J.M. Coetzee, who wrote somewhere that, quote, "the prelude to the sexual act can be more desirable, more erotically fulfilling than the act itself," end quote, I left Zeus to his thoughts and began scrolling through my newly acquired cell phone. And after a while, sure enough, the guy comes out of the shop, crosses the street, goes around the car, and gets in on my side, then slithers across my lap, and with half his body still on my lap, attaches himself to Zeus to deliver the anticipated blowjob. And maybe because Zeus didn't seem to be enjoying the experience in that cramped space, the car was a 1965 Ford Mustang Coupe, I kept whispering in his ear, "Say what you want, just say what you want." I could run this story into the ground with more lurid details, but won't risk boring you. All the same, allow me to add, for your amusement, or prurience as the case may be, that just as he climaxed, Zeus ecstatically grabbed my cell phone. Okay, So this took place less than 100 years ago. It's hard to keep up with the passage of time these days. By now, I've probably revealed more or less than you ever wanted to know while getting a bit sidetracked along the way. Aside from the fact that the guy from the shop totally ignored my female presence, ran over me roughshod, as it were, the crux of the matter is that this was Zeus's setup, not mine. Which is not to say that I'm passing judgment on him or it, nothing of the sort. I loved that Mustang. More to the point, I wish to emphasize, however circuitously, that the skewed and interlaced imbalances of power, privilege, entitlement, desire, intimidation, ambition, and consent, mutual and otherwise, can get played out in some pretty weird ways. Indeed, I've only recently begun to face up to the creepiness of the sadistic sexual fantasies I've inflicted on my muses. Such antics should be deemed neither exceptional nor exempt from condemnation. A mea culpa on my part may or may not be adequate in redressing such transgressions, but as I indicated earlier, I've been hoping for a modicum of atonement by way of this earthly research and whatever insights and actions accrue from it. On the heels of the rapidly unfolding events down here, these efforts must now include bearing witness to how gods and men transpose their obsessive sex-in-the-head scenarios into obnoxious aggrandizement, which our two cultures both engender and shield from sight. Emboldening you guys when caught out to trumpet in self-defense. I thought she or he was willing, or the situation has been mischaracterized, or, even more damning, I don't remember. That earthling women, however, keep coming forward in mind-boggling numbers to air explicit accounts of men's scummy behavior, both past and present, at all levels of the social spectrum. That is what continues to bring me up short. I'm going to check in with Terpsichore to find out why she disappeared in such a rush following our last meeting. It's apparent, now that I'm thinking about it, that she was pissed off for more reasons than one and couldn't wait to escape from Earth and me fast enough. As soon as I get back, I will definitely encourage her to speak out on behalf of female Olympians and Earthlings everywhere, even if it lands me in the soup with Zeus. Let's hope some real and lasting changes will take place as a result, beyond all the current revelations that may yet, unfortunately, end up being a flash in the pan. I am now remembering that the last time I was futzing around in the underworld, I ran into Ida Lupino, the remarkable Hollywood actress and director, and asked her to recommend a favorite movie that she herself had directed. She suggested Outrage from 1950. Believe it or not, it's about a rape and the repercussions for its victim. When I eventually caught a screening at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, I was surprised that this subject was being dealt with in Hollywood during such a retro era. It's not easy to watch. The writing and acting seem a bit stilted when compared to Hollywood's present-day penchant for rapid-fire, mealy jabbering, and the female protagonist continually runs into men who assault or manipulate her. Frankly, I had hoped that she would marry the psychiatrist at the end and live happily ever after. But I have to admit, the film was way ahead of its time, both for its subject matter and ambiguous, inconclusive ending. I strongly urge all of you Me Toos to see it. 3. Then there's Myanmar, which is suddenly, maybe always has been, a hornet's nest. Aung San Suu Kyi, the foreign minister and state counselor, or whatever titles the generals use to avoid having to make her their president, after receiving a Nobel Peace Prize and endearing herself to the world, is now being reviled for her part in the barbarous expulsion of the Rohingya Muslims from her country, where they have lived for generations. It's possible I haven't been paying attention, but I was shocked to hear the term ethnic cleansing for the first time when told about this situation. Whether you characterize Suu Kyi's connection to the current brutality as detachment, passivity, collusion, helplessness, or political cunning, I can't help but agree with most people's negative judgment of her. I'd like to ask her, why is there not room in your country for other religions besides Buddhism? Talk to your generals. Don't just stand by and let them pursue their murderous agenda. Whatever the limits of your power, use it for good. I am aware that I may be simplifying the Myanmar situation and offering ineffectual advice, but much as Suu Kyi can't be blamed for the misguided veneration heaped on her during her 15-year house arrest, I think if she continues to do nothing, she should be held accountable in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, along with her generals. She for being more concerned with the well-being of her vicious xenophobic dog than with that of the victims of ethnic cleansing, whose plight she ignores but must be all too aware of. I wonder how the Rohingya woman whose baby was snatched from her arms and thrown into the fire feels about Aung San Suu Kyi now. At this point, I feel my outrage flagging. I'm just not up for another confrontation. 4, in any case, as I write, I am reminded of another catastrophe looming over your planet, global warming and its consequences, which really should be number 1 in terms of urgency. I need not belabor you with the entire roster of toxic causalities, like the fact that Robert E. Murray, the CEO of the largest coal company in the United States, and the fucking moron appointed slash and burn administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, are in cahoots to roll back Obama's restrictions on the burning of fossil fuels while dismantling the very agency Pruitt's predecessors were charged to uphold, with the result that the EPA is now a subsidiary of the polluters it is supposed to regulate. As all rational people know, scientists' reports about fossil fuels and their link to global warming and the degradation of Earth's ecosystems are neither hoax nor conspiracy. What you probably don't know, which should alarm you, is that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is higher today than it has been in at least 800,000 years. As for the optimists, along with the deniers, opportunists, and liars who contend that the current ecological situation on Earth is no more dire than it was in previous periods of famine, war, and plague, I must protest that the stakes are higher now. The entire planet is at risk, and not just this or that geographic locality. The point of no return is at hand, a mere second as the history of the universe goes. And regardless of the opinion you may have of me, your sun god, the deteriorating conditions in your oceans and atmosphere are neither my fault nor of my making. They are way beyond my control. The foregoing afterthoughts comprise a mere tip of the melting icebergs, so to speak. You in the United States are in serious trouble, to put it more profanely, in deep shit. Your political disarray and social decline in high gear. 1% of your population profits at the expense of more and more people who are out of work. 1 out of 5 children in the U.S. lives below the poverty line, a larger percentage than in any other industrialized nation. Even those of you who see yourselves as enlightened have underestimated or ignored the consequences of economic inequality and de facto racial segregation in your country. And the Koch brothers, those finagling chemical and oil industry overlords, through their hand-in-glove sway over your sinister vice president, are well on their way to sticking over 100 of their own people into instrumental government positions in the EPA and the Department of the Interior. And the fucking moron semi-literate whoopee cushion will never notice. He's probably too busy being feted and sucked up to by the Saudis, and too busy authorizing a $110 billion sale of arms to them, including the precision-guided missiles with which they destroy hospitals and kill hundreds of innocent men, women, and children in Yemen. He's also busied himself with making it easier for employers to refuse to include birth control in their health care plans, while reinstating the global gag rule on abortion counseling and saying fuck you to 200,000 Salvadorans and almost 60,000 Haitians by rescinding deportation protections previously granted to them. And now he's busy blaming U.S. gun carnage on crazy people instead of the National Rifle Association and the craven politicians it supports, including the fucking asshole himself, who, if he's allowed his druthers, would supply all your public school teachers with guns. Come to think of it, how about arming not only those teachers, but every man and woman in the U.S. over 18 years old with AR-15 assault rifles? Yes, the fucking moron's calendar is full. Between such maneuvering and unpredictable early morning tweets and gluing himself to Fox News for hours and visiting his golf empire, he has hardly any time left for temper tantrums and threatening and firing his cabinet members and praising international despots. The German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk has called him a degenerate sheriff and adds, he channels global feelings of ecological doom, but instead of waiting for a crisis to impose a ruling, his rulings get him the emergencies he needs. The playground for madness is vast, end quote, which leaves all of you, and surprisingly, even me, susceptible to his rage entrepreneurship. Actually, Sloterdijk is only half right on this account. I doubt if the word ecological can be found in the fucking moron's vocabulary. I dare you folks to cram all that and much, much more into your pipes and smoke it. This is a hard-working president, and he's got you by the short hairs. He's in your hands, millennials, and I'm counting on yous to overcome. I just wish you old ones could live to see the world without him and his vile legacy. In any case, and for the time being, please be a little indulgent and allow me a soupçon of sarcasm. I'm in the grip of one of my chronic fatigue days. If I, an Olympic god, can feel so besieged, I can well imagine the stress that you earthlings must be experiencing. I got a glimpse of this when a female acquaintance down here recounted a dream she had in which I was a protagonist. And this is her dream. You and I were at some kind of karaoke bar hiding, but then you decided to sing, although you rejected everything on their playlist. You came up with your own song, some kind of show tune, very Rodgers and Hartish, but the lyrics were all about Kierkegaard. You were creating impressively on-point arguments in rhyme. I wish I could remember what they were. The only thing that's lasted with me was that you paired existence with resistance and Camus with fuck you. The crowd went bonkers for it. After reading with dismay the previously mentioned items gleaned from various news outlets, I too had a dream. And this is my dream. A group of people enters a performance space and stands in a line, shoulder to shoulder, facing the audience. I instruct each of them to hurl a brief invective at the fucking narcissist seated in the front row, and then exit one at a time. But the line grows longer and longer as more and more people show up, and those newly arrived haven't heard my instructions, so I must keep repeating them. The situation is out of control and seems interminable until I manage mercifully to wake up and put a stop to it. Has it really come to this, that distress over Earth's political and ecological upheavals has invaded not only the dreams of mortals, but the dreams of us Olympians? I am overwhelmed with a sadness and a sense of futility. I can't help thinking about Polyhymnia's exhortation to leave the befouled planet before it's too late, which reminds me of a line from that play by, what's his name? Give me a break. Even gods have memory lapses. Before, and this is the quote, it's actually from, what's his name? I'll tell, it's in a footnote. Before life on Earth becomes finally merely impossible, it will for a long time have become completely unbearable. That's not the syntax I would use, but I'll be generous. After careful consideration, and much as I hate to abandon you guys, I've decided to heed Polyhymnia's advice at long last. Unlike Sisyphus, I've not been condemned to hang out down here and nurse my frustrations for all eternity. On a happier note, Jane Goodall put a few of your dilemmas into perspective when last I saw her. In fact, as recently as 2 weeks ago, over BLTs in her favorite Manhattan diner, after I had arrived late and breathless from taking an ill-advised shortcut and climbed 130 steps in Hudson Heights to get there. Charming and sweet-natured as ever, she said, "What can we do to help this gloomy situation? I meet so many incredible people doing amazing things, saving animals on the brink of extinction, restoring the forest, cleaning up a river. It's knowing what can be done that gives people the courage to fight." Yes, knowing what can be done is key. I think this is as good a time as any for me to bow out of earthlings' travails and leave you to manage things on your own. After all my griping and nitpicking, I still have confidence in your resilience, ingenuity, and compassion. I wish all of you the utmost fortitude you will need to stave off the decline, and in the worst case scenario, the end of your world and the lives of those dear to you. I'm out of here. Wait a minute. Not so fast. Forgive me for detaining you just a mite longer with the following postscript. In the early 1950s, I spent a year on Earth as a 17-year-old teenager attending her first and only year of college. While there, I took a course in Western philosophy and became deeply involved in the writings of Plato, Bishop Berkeley, and Bertrand Russell, among others. Nevertheless, in contrast to the gutsy indigenous Canadian who wrote, quote, "I wanted as much of the world as I could take, and I didn't have the conscience to be ashamed," end quote. I must confess with no little embarrassment that as that depressed 18-year-old, and for reasons then unknown to me, I could barely admit to wanting anything, and I did have the conscience to be ashamed, only in my case, ashamed of aborting my formal education, which I have continued on occasion to regret. Under other circumstances, I might have aspired to become a literary giant or philosopher or statesman, but the cards were stacked, and when a vacancy came up, I settled into the more modest occupation of solar charioteer. This most recent visit, however, has once more brought me face to face with my fate, and here again I find myself crashing against the shoals of my intellectual deficiencies and muddled ambitions. As I've said before, the past is never dead. If it doesn't grab you by the throat, it gives you a royal kick in the ass. I fear that the ambivalent mode of discourse in this angst-ridden essay will raise questions, if not hackles, that I will be ill-equipped to address, and by presenting myself as an artist, which I frequently do when I'm down here, I risk being unmasked and accused of fraud, or at the very least, opportunism. But even real artists get away with murder. In the popular imagination, they play it. They play it like. Oh, damn. They play it like it lays. They play it like it lades, and then slink away from the storms brought on by their gestures. Who, me? How do you expect me to figure out how to change the world or solve its problems? Whether or not I am able to pull off my artist impersonation, whenever I'm here, I inevitably find myself ricocheting from catastrophe to absurdity, from chaos to elation, from desperation to Keystone Cops, while being pummeled by the sheer volume of human actions. Under such chaotic conditions, what on earth can I do for you people? What more can I say? Having spilled my guts in this protracted tirade, I should cut my losses and go home before I succumb to the disorder that a Portuguese poet described in a poem. What kind of magic potion did you give me from that jar that I forget who I am, but always know who you are? Ironically, a happy outcome of my latest extended sojourn on your planet is that I can now allow myself to be a wee bit proud of my function in the universe. After all, what would you guys do without my daily excursions across the heavens? There will be many days when my work up there will comfort you, as yours down here, unfortunately, will rarely comfort me. With all that said, I am finally done. Though it may have seemed like a long goodbye, this time I mean it. Not wanting to leave on the wrong foot, however, I shall propose a temporary antidote to your quandaries and steer you to a favorite Laurel and Hardy short, which I consider quite germane to these troubled times. It's called Big Business, directed in 1929 by Leo McCarey. You can find it on YouTube, and I am confident it will elicit laughter and buoy your spirits. In the meantime, keep in mind that the smooth functioning of the world depends on invisible, tribological improvements. Most sincerely, Apollo Musigete. P.P.S. Just before leaving Earth, I took a long walk up to Fort Tryon Park in New York City to look out over the mighty Hudson River. You folks are so fortunate. We don't have anything like that on Olympus. And I just want to, this word tribological is new to me, probably new to a number of you. It's the study of interacting moving surfaces. Thank you very much.